Hello, and welcome back to the Calm and Connected podcast. I'm your host, Janine Halloran, and on today's episode, I speak with Rachel Davis. She is a school counselor. I finally have a school counselor on the podcast. I'm so excited. So she's been a school counselor in Southern California and also in Costa Rica, and she gets the chance to tell you a little bit more about her background and how she got to where she is today, which is the counselor and curriculum director over at Bright Futures Counseling. And she also hosts her own podcast called School Counseling Simplified, which I've been a guest on. So I had a great time chatting with her and talking about the ways that school counselors can support not only the students, but also the families and the teachers that they work with in their school. So I hope that you enjoy this podcast episode. Hi, Rachel. Thanks so much for coming on the Calm and Connected podcast.
Thanks for having me, Janine. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to share your work and what you do with people. So for others who don't know who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and where you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rachel Davis. I'm a school counselor and curriculum designer. So I'm from Georgia originally. I feel like I have to always start with that because I do still have an accent. I haven't lived there in like 10 years, but still have the accent. So from Georgia, born and raised, and then I moved. I went to undergrad there, and I majored in psychology. And I thought I was going to do work in the nonprofit realm. I loved psychology. I knew I wanted to do something helping people, but wasn't really sure what. But then I ended up having an internship with communities and schools where I worked with at-risk youth. And I was like, oh, maybe I do want to be a school counselor. That's interesting. So I went to grad school in San Diego. And I got my master's in school counseling, did all my internships there, and then ended up working at some elementary schools in San Diego County. And I loved it. That was my first job as a school counselor, and honestly, my dream job. Elementary is just so much fun. The kids I worked with were great. It was a small community, just amazing. So I had a really good experience there. But then my husband and I were really avid travelers, and we had always wanted to travel. So we're like, we're going to take some time off before we have kids and kind of backpack the whole world, which is what we did, which is kind of crazy when I say it out loud. But before that, when I was working as elementary school counselor, I found myself, as I'm sure all educators do, like having to make your own things, right? Like the school supplies you with curriculum, but you're usually supplementing, coming up with your own activities, lesson plans, staying up at night on the weekends. So I started making a few things for my own students, and then I would sell them on Teachers Pay Teachers. And I noticed there was a big demand for this, like other counselors were coming. And I started blogging as well, just kind of sharing my experiences. So when my husband and I decided to travel, that's something I kept doing because I still wanted, even though I wasn't working at a school, I wanted to, stay relevant in the counselor community. So I continued to create resources and blog for other counselors. Then we decided we were tired of traveling, wanted to settle down. So we ended up in Costa Rica, which is where I still live. And it was honestly just meant to be. We were considering coming back to Costa Rica. And then I saw a job opportunity as a school counselor at an international school here. So I was the international school counselor for K-12. And that was a completely different experience than the schools I had worked at in California, but super rewarding and very cool. So I did that. And then now, flash forward to today, I'm still in Costa Rica. I have 2 small children, so I'm no longer working in the school, but I serve counselors now through my blog, my podcast, and I have a membership for school counselors as well.
Wow. You know what? I love that you followed your heart. I really do. I think it's incredible. And for people who don't necessarily like you think about travel, but you don't jump in and do it. My family and I have done that as well. We actually lived in California for a year. We took our little kids, like a first and a third grader. We traveled across the country and traveled back with them. Amazing. And that was it was amazing. And it was such an eye-opening experience just to have school in a different place, to live in a different place, even though it's the same country. It's a very different kind of feel. And we even did like a summer in Toronto. And that was really fun. So I think being able to be open to travel and seeing different parts of the world and figuring out how to make it work. That's really cool. And I'm so glad that you were able to do that and still use that part of your brain where it's really focused on helping kids and helping counselors. I think that's amazing and wonderful.
Thank you. Yes, it was. And it just really, I mean, I can always tell when I feel like I'm making the right decision, when things seem really aligned and like effortless. And it was like, oh, I was minoring in Spanish, and then this school job opened up in Costa Rica. We were already looking at Costa Rica because we had been there a few times and loved it. It just all kind of literally worked out. So blessed for that experience. But also, yeah, you just got to stay open. You never know. It seems a little risky, but you got to go for it sometimes.
I know it does. It seems really risky. And then you think through some of the like logistical problems of it. And it sounds like you really did in terms of being able to keep up doing something while you were traveling. And that's, I think, the beauty of online work is that you can do it wherever you are. So there's a bonus to it. I know there's drawbacks people talk about, but there's also bonuses that it allows you to do different things in terms of your dreams for your life. So I think it's amazing that you went ahead and did it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So in terms of school counseling, I would love to just chat a little bit with you about what role a school counselor plays. Like, I've been a school counselor in a few different types of environments and a few different kinds of schools. And in my brain, I have like this ideal of what a school counselor program should look like, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and what role should a school counselor play? What job should they have in the building, and how can they support the students?
Yes, great question. So in short, I think the school counselor's job is to help the children succeed at school, right? So there's private counseling and therapy outside of school, but we're trying to do like a short-term solution-focused program to help students return to the classroom so they can learn, which is why they're at school. But as we know, many kiddos cannot learn because they're facing, emotional struggles, social skills challenges. Their parents got divorced. They didn't eat breakfast. Like, there's so many things underneath, right? So that's the counselor's job, I believe, is to address those issues to get our kiddos ready to learn. And how counselors can do that is through layered interventions. So a 3-tier support system. So tier 1 being those preventative classroom lessons. So counselors going into classrooms, at least once a month and teaching lessons on self-regulation, social skills. These could be like character education type lessons as well, but more of like social emotional lessons. And then I believe counselors can help support students in the second tier through small group counseling. So these are students who need a little more support in one area, right? So every kid's getting the preventative lesson, then some kids need a little more support. Maybe their parents or teachers are like, hey, we're seeing this struggle. Can you please help them? So we'll work on that in small group. And then the third tier, those are the kiddos who need the most support. So that's the one-on-one individual counseling. And I like to think of it, in that tiered pyramid. So students are kind of moving in and out of the levels depending on the needs that they have at that time. And then outside of the direct student services, counselors can help support families and teachers, and kind of like wrapping around how they can also support the child.
Yes, absolutely. I always feel like people tend to focus on the student piece of it, but there's also a lot of supporting educators, supporting the other people in the building, supporting the family, listening to them, hearing what's going on, being able to suggest places where they can get extra support if they need more support. You never know what kind of questions families will come up with. And then it was always, interesting to be able to help them find something that was going to be helpful for their student and their situation. I love that. And so I think you encapsulated it perfectly. And I love that idea of the pyramid because, you've got the first tier of instruction where it's like everybody. So that's like the bottom of the pyramid. And then it gets smaller as you go up. So you're not seeing every single kid individually in the school. Nobody could do that. And it's real. That's like, we really need to be focused on those kids. And if they need more additional support, then you can refer them out to somebody else so that you're not
exactly
doing all of it's so much work, but really there's a lot of just, okay, I'm just triaging and I'm trying to help short term. And then long term, that's for your outside support system. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Yes. And because I'll have counselors come to me and say, how do I fit it all in? Because I'm seeing this one student, I'm seeing them every week for the whole school year. They keep coming. And I'm like, whoa, red flag. Like, we don't need them to keep coming. So you can do, 6 to 8 weeks, have a plan, a purpose, collect pre and post data, and then assess and say, hey, is this working? Great. You can go back to class. Is this not working? Okay, we might need to refer to outside help. So I really encourage counselors to check in and assess what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting because there are some districts that I've worked where I was the counselor for a child for the whole year because that was part of their individualized education plan. And so when that comes in as part of the IEP, that's school support services that need to happen at the school. I totally understand that. Right. But I would often advocate for, but what about, is this the best use of my time? Does it make sense? Like, am I only for these particular kids or am I for the building? And that's big conversations to have as a district, as a school, with your principal. So it's very tricky, but ideally it should be you're delivering support to the students and you should be available for the entire student body.
Yes, I agree.
So thinking about whole class lessons, those were always really interesting and fun, and you never knew what kids were going to say. What's one of your go-to whole class lessons that you love to teach?
Yes, I love this question. I had a hard time picking because there's so many, but I think, just feelings and emotional regulation, especially at the elementary level, helping students understand how they're feeling and talking about what that looks like in your body. Okay, you say you're angry. What is that? That's so abstract to them, right? So let's talk about what angry feels like. Is your stomach hurting? Are your fists clenched? Is your jaw tight? Are your eyebrows furrowed? Identifying what our feelings are, what our emotions are, and then learning the self-regulation piece. So, okay, I am feeling angry. Now that I realize that, what can I do to calm down? And then practicing those coping strategies. Sometimes we just think that it's, inherent that kids already know, they know to take deep breaths or count to 10, because that may seem really basic, but it really helps. And even myself as an adult, when I'm angry, I'm like, okay, take your deep breaths. It still works across all levels. So it may seem simple, but this lesson, I can't encourage counselors to teach it enough and repeatedly. Like, you may do it one year, but I think at the beginning of the year, every year is a really good time to teach this lesson.
Oh, I think that's perfect, because that self-regulation piece, when you can name your feeling, it automatically becomes easier to self-regulate. So that is such a huge piece for kids to understand. Adults need this too. To understand, I'm feeling this in my body. And that's the way that they can start to make those connections of, I feel this way. I feel like my eyebrows are getting furrowed. I'm noticing my hands are clenched. Now it's time to do a strategy. And that can be a very long time from identifying it in their body to actually doing the strategy, like actually making that mental leap to being like, okay, I feel angry. I need to have a strategy that I'm using. That's really hard for some kids. That's really hard. So keep going. I would agree with you. Keep going, keep trying it, keep introducing it in different ways and encouraging the classroom if they can, if there's like a calm space or a reset space that they can use, because that again will really help reinforce those feelings and self-regulation work. So I agree with you as a person who talks about coping skills all the time. I think coping skills are key, and I use them myself all day long. So I think that's great. And so one of the other things that you had mentioned was these small group lessons. So I'd love to hear from you about how do school counselors figure out who to see and what to focus on for a year?
Right. Yes. So I like to do mine referral based. So I'll have referral forms that I send out to parents and teachers and say, if you have a student you're concerned about, you can submit a referral form, and you'll be surprised. You'll get several and many similar topics. And that's kind of how I determine what to do the groups on. So we'll see, oh, we're seeing a lot of fifth grade girls struggling with friendship issues or relational aggression issues. So then we'll do a group specific to that. In terms of how many kids and when, it's just kind of logistics. It's easier if they're the same grade level because their schedules are similar. But I will mix grade levels, mix genders. I like to, switch it up. But you don't want to do, a kindergartner and a fifth grader. Obviously, that won't work. You have to be developmentally appropriate and keep that in mind. But yeah, in terms of topics and which students, I like to do referral based. I also like to do a needs assessment. So you can survey your teachers and say, hey, what are some big needs we're seeing this year? Or what did you see last year? What concerns do we have as a school? And then another thing you can do that I'm getting more into this type of data is it's a little more proactive than waiting for the referrals to come in. But you can go to your principal and say, hey, what are we seeing? Where are the problems? What kind of discipline referrals are we seeing? And perhaps they're getting a lot of discipline referrals, for fighting at recess or something. Well, then you can say, okay, what's the preventative version of that? I'm going to do an anger management group or something like that. And that data is so exciting because you can say, okay, the principal was getting, 5 discipline referrals a week for this topic. I got these students, we did the group. Now we're only seeing 3 discipline referrals a week or something like that. And that is so powerful to say, look how great our counseling program is. As a result of the small group, our referrals have gone down. So that's another way you can determine what you want to do your groups on as well.
Oh, that's so powerful to be able to look at just something, that is tracked already. They're tracking referrals for discipline, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can look at that and use that information to be able to inform what you're doing to really meet the needs of the school, that's incredible. I love that idea.
Thank you. Yes. And I will have to say for eager first year counselors, the referrals will come. So just wait, because I know I would see a fun group and be like, oh, I can't wait to do this group. And I'm kind of recruit kids, oh, do you want to be in the social skills group? I'm like, no, back up. They'll come, because then you're literally swamped. But I have before contacted teachers at the beginning of the year when we find out who's in which class. And we don't want to assume that kids are going to resume services just because they had them last year. But sometimes I like to just say, hey, heads up, this student, was in a group last year. Keep an eye out for these behaviors, because obviously we want to get, ahead of things. So you could do that, especially if it's a new teacher and they don't really know the students yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just being able to keep those lines of communication open with the teachers in the building is huge, because they see them, especially at that elementary level, they see them all day long, pretty much. And so if there is a problem, they're going to let you know right away, or no, they should know to let you know.
Right. Exactly. And that, and I almost said that when you were asking about my favorite lesson. I love to do a meet the counselor lesson at the beginning of the school year as a way to tell students, hey, this is who I am. These are things that I provide. This is how I can help you. And you're also kind of reminding teachers of the referral process. That way they don't forget to reach out to you, because a lot of times the counselors are, an invaluable resource, but people aren't using them.
Yes, which is unfortunate, but that's why I always like to advocate. Make sure people know what you do. Make sure people know where to find you and how to contact you if there's a question. And then when they come and they have a question, try and help them and support them in as many ways as you possibly can. So, but I will say, one of the things is organization, right? Because you are managing. I mean, if you're doing a K-12 school, you're managing a lot of different grades, a lot of different lessons, a lot of different developmental stages. How do you recommend school counselors not lose their minds and keep themselves organized?
Yes, great question. And it is challenging. And mine has, over years of trial and error, I've developed a few things, and then I share them with counselors, and I love hearing that they're like, oh, this was a game changer. I feel so much more organized. But simple spreadsheets. I love Google Sheets. So I have 2, I kind of call it my counseling hub, and it's 2 separate things. One is a caseload spreadsheet. So I have a list of every student that I'm seeing in groups or individual, and then just some identifying factors like teacher name, grade level, area of need, who referred them. And then it's kind of to keep tabs on them. What status are they in? Have they turned in their permission slip, but they're not yet scheduled? Or are we in the middle of sessions? Or did they complete their group? It's just kind of a way to keep track. of who's on your caseload, if you're seeing them in a group or if you're seeing them individually. And then the second sheet I have is the counseling log. And this is a spreadsheet where I track who I'm seeing daily. So this is kind of like, actually who came in today and very brief what we did. This way you can remember what you did because they come in the next week and you're like, what did we do last week? But if you have a quick note, that's great. And this is a way for you to track how many students you're serving. So you may have, a group scheduled, but if only 3 of the 5 students come, you want to know that, right? So it helps for attendance purposes. It helps to, gather those services provided, the number of students that you've seen and, in what capacity. So those 2 forms together, I call it, like I said, my counseling hub. I have the caseload spreadsheet and then the counseling log just pulled up on my computer. And it's a great way to keep track of everyone so no one slips through the cracks.
It's so tricky, right? I used to actually do that all by hand. Like the way I had it set up, it was just so hard, especially when, you've got, lunch issues and recess issues, and then people are coming in back to back to back. You've got to be able to have a way to track what you actually do during your day, which is very tricky to do.
And my calendar, I didn't even mention, I love to use a digital calendar where, so if a student, if we start a group, we'll say, okay, we're meeting for 6 weeks. I schedule it for a reoccurring time, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. It's on the calendar. And then I have my class lessons scheduled. And you and I were chatting a little bit off air about Calendly and how that's a good tool you can use to schedule class lessons with teachers. And then you have your individual sessions. It all kind of, I like to color code mine, but your calendar starts just blank and white and then just gets filled in all crazy.
But you know what? Color coding is amazing. And I was talking to somebody else about the color coding piece of it, because then you at a glance can see what you're doing. So I color code work versus home for my own personal stuff. So it makes it easier for me to know what I'm doing. Like if it's mostly purple, then I know I've got a really busy day work wise. If it's mostly blue, I'm with my kids and I'm doing all sorts of mom things. So I think color coding.
I love that.
Oh, it's so good.
I say that too. That as a glance, I've said that before too, like, especially if you do your class lessons, small groups and individuals in different colors, because it takes different energy, right? The energy you're bringing for 30 kindergartners is a lot different than a one-on-one grief session. So if you can look at your day and kind of say, oh, okay, this is what I've got to get ready for. This is what's coming up. You can prepare.
Oh my goodness. So good. I love these ideas. So you have something that actually, you mentioned something earlier at the beginning. You have a membership, right? About to school counseling. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. So I've had it since 2021. It's called Impact. And it's a membership for school counselors, a monthly membership. So counselor, I like to call it like Netflix for counseling, because I've kind of set it up to look like that on the inside. So counselors, who are members log in, and then they have access to hundreds of like groups, lessons, activities. They can search by like topic, by season, by grade level, and they just find what they need, download it, and then can use it right away. Because I know I love having it all digital. I've tried before, like binders, printing everything, but I always go in and find what I need and then print it and use it that day. So, but some counselors in the membership do print and prep everything in advance. So it's up, user preference. But then in addition to that, we do some quarterly professional development where I do live trainings. And then we have a community, which is probably my favorite part, because I know counseling can feel like you're on your own island, right? We're like usually the only counselor at our school site, sometimes in our district. So it's really cool to connect with other counselors. And we have like a group and an app, and we do Zoom calls where we all chat, and people will say like, oh, this is what I'm doing this month. It's going great. Or people will bring like a tough case, where they're like, hey, I want to get some feedback on this. What would you guys do? So the community piece is really cool.
That is amazing. I would have totally loved that as a school counselor. I did.
Right?
I know, right? Like I did, luckily, I was the only counselor in my building, but I had a really strong relationship with the counselors from the other buildings, especially the elementary school. So I was 4th and 5th, and they were K-3. And we met very regularly. And if there was, and we shared cases, obviously, right? So like they had come, a lot of times the kids stayed in district. So if they were, before they had been at one of the K-3 schools, I could call down to them and brainstorm and hear a little bit more. If there was ever a tragedy or anything and I needed more support, I would call and they would be right there helping me and
Yes.
supporting me. So it was really lovely. But I would have loved having even more support and having more, peer contact to be able to just
Mhm.
like hear from other people what they're doing, what is working for them, what they're noticing about what's going on in their schools, and is it similar to what's going on in my school. So I think that's incredible that you've created that, and congratulations on making that happen.
Thank you. Yes. No, I love it. And, it's cool because as the membership is growing, we have like over 500 members now. So there's people from all over. So, for example, I know Texas has some like mandated lessons they have to do that I wasn't familiar with because I've never been a counselor in Texas. But someone asked in the group, and then like 5 other people were like, oh, yeah, I know that. I've got that. So it's just the more it grows, the cooler it is to connect with other counselors.
That's incredible. That's so amazing. I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to just ask you the question I ask all of my guests. What is one way you like to rest and relax?
Okay, I was laughing when you sent this because I am horrible at resting. The other day it was raining and my husband's like, oh, nice, it's raining. Let's just like watch some football and like make some chili and the kids can play toys. And I was like, it's only sprinkling. I think we can still go on a walk and go to the beach. And I'm just like, cannot sit still. But so I was thinking about this. I do love to go to the beach with my family. We're fortunate. We live right across the street from the beach. We go every day. So I do kind of relax at the beach. But I'm usually playing, so not really. But the other things I do to relax is I read my Kindle every night before bed. And I love that, just until I fall asleep. Sometimes I make it 30 minutes. Sometimes it's only 5 minutes, but I love reading. This year particularly, I did a personal challenge where I'm only reading nonfiction. So that's been kind of cool. Memoir too, not just like super dry stuff. And then I do love occasional yoga class. I don't go as much as I should, but I do love yoga.
I was going to say, part of the reason why I became a counselor is because I love playing. Like I love coloring and I love playing board games and card games. So I find it relaxing.
That's true. And I was just thinking, when I am playing on the beach with my kids, we're doing something like, seashell houses or something. And I'm kind of unplugging from all the mental load of everything else. So I guess I'm playing, but I'm relaxing in the sense that I'm not on, thinking or on my computer.
Yes, exactly. So let yourself play. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Yeah, sure. So I have a podcast, School Counseling Simplified, or you can find me on Instagram at Bright Futures Counseling.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And for all of you listening, I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. If you like it, please feel free to share it and send it to your colleagues. And as always, take a few minutes, have a little fun, and have an awesome day.